Maddox Derkosh. On November 4, 2012, 2-year-old Maddox Derkosh was visiting the Pittsburgh Zoo with his family. They stopped at the African painted dog exhibit, where a wooden viewing deck allowed visitors to look down into the enclosure. The deck had a metal railing and several warning signs clearly stating not to lift children onto it. Despite the warnings, Maddox's mother wanted him to get a better view, so she carefully lifted him above the railing. In a split second, her grip slipped. Maddox lost balance, fell over the edge and dropped about 14 feet down into the enclosure. A safety net was stretched below the platform, but it was only meant to catch small falling items like sunglasses or phones. The child's weight caused him to bounce off the net and tumble directly into the open area below, where 11 African painted dogs were roaming. The pack rushed toward him immediately. Horrified witnesses said Maddox's mother screamed and tried to jump in after her son, but other visitors restrained her. Everyone on the platform watched helplessly as the dogs surrounded and attacked the boy. The attack was brutal and swift. Maddox suffered dozens of deep wounds to his head and neck, and his internal organs were fatally damaged. He bled to death before staff could reach him. A police officer on scene fired his weapon, killing one of the dogs in an attempt to stop the attack, but the rest of the pack didn't retreat. After the tragedy, blame quickly turned into controversy. The zoo stated that the mother had ignored safety warnings and acted recklessly. The family argued that the enclosure design was unsafe and that the railing put children at risk. Both parties filed legal actions, but eventually, no criminal charges were brought against Maddox's mother. A private settlement was later reached between the family and the zoo. Shortly after, the viewing deck was permanently removed, and the painted dog exhibit was closed. The surviving dogs were relocated to other zoos, and the area was later repurposed for a cheetah display. Dawn Brancheau. Dawn Brancheau was one of SeaWorld Orlando's most respected and experienced trainers. After dedicating 15 years of her life to working with orcas, she had built a deep bond with the park's largest whale, Tilikum, a 12,000-pound male known for his immense size and strength. On the day of the tragedy, Dawn was performing in the popular Dine with Shamu show. Guests sat around the pool enjoying their meals while watching trainers and whales perform together in carefully rehearsed routines. Toward the end of the show, Dawn lay on a shallow ledge beside Tilikum, gently rubbing his head as part of a familiar and affectionate sequence. Then, without any sign of warning, Tilikum lunged forward. In a single, powerful movement, he grabbed Dawn and pulled her into the water. Witnesses described the moment as sudden and violent. The giant whale dragged her beneath the surface and began thrashing around the pool with tremendous force. Staff immediately jumped into action, throwing nets, signaling, and tossing food into the water in hopes of distracting Tilikum. Trainers attempted to guide him through adjoining pools and into the smaller medical pool, where he could be confined. But for 45 agonizing minutes, Tilikum refused to let her go. Trainers and guests could only watch in horror as the struggle continued. When her body was finally recovered, the autopsy revealed the full extent of the attack. Although the official cause of death was drowning, Dawn's injuries were catastrophic. Her spinal cord had been severed, her jaw, ribs, and neck bones shattered. Her scalp had been completely torn away, her left arm detached, and her knee dislocated. It was clear that the tremendous power of the orca had caused devastating trauma before she lost her life. The incident sent shockwaves through SeaWorld and the marine entertainment industry worldwide. Following her death, new safety regulations were introduced, and trainers were permanently banned from entering the water during orca shows. Patricia Wyman. In April 1996, Patricia Wyman, a 24-year-old wildlife biologist, had just started what she believed would be her dream career. She had recently been hired at the Halliburton Forest and Wildlife Reserve, a sanctuary known for maintaining its wolves in a nearly wild state. Visitors could only view the animals through one-way glass, and staff were repeatedly warned that direct interaction with the wolves was never allowed. Just a few days into her new job, Patricia entered the wolves' 15-acre enclosure alone. Normally, the pack avoided human contact, keeping their distance whenever staff approached. But that day something was different. The wolves were alert and standing when she stepped inside, their attention fixed on her. Witnesses later reported that the wolves began circling slowly, surrounding her as she moved deeper into their territory. Patricia likely sensed the danger and tried to leave, but as she turned to retreat, she tripped over a fallen tree. That single stumble sealed her fate. The alpha male lunged first, knocking her down. The rest of the pack followed immediately, biting and pulling at her arms and legs. Their sharp teeth tore through her clothing, flesh, and muscle as they dragged her from different directions. Patricia tried to defend herself, But each wolf weighed close to 175 pounds, far too powerful for her to fight off. She lost blood rapidly and weakened under the assault. Though she tried to shield her head and neck, the wolves' relentless attack overwhelmed her. Within minutes, Patricia was dead, only 4 days after starting her new position. When authorities arrived, the wolves were still gathered protectively around her body, not yet having fed on her. As officers approached, the pack began growling and closing in until warning gunshots were fired into the air, scattering them. Experts later said the wolves' behavior had shifted suddenly and unpredictably, likely triggered by dominance dynamics within the pack, particularly the alpha male. No one knows why Patricia entered the enclosure that day, especially since it wasn't feeding time. Once inside, she had no chance of escape. Rosa King. It was a seemingly ordinary morning at Hamerton Zoo Park when 33-year-old Rosa King, a dedicated and experienced zookeeper, began her daily routine. Part of her morning duties involved cleaning the large glass windows inside the tiger paddock before visitors arrived. It was a task she had done countless times before. The enclosure housed Sissup, a full-grown male Malayan tiger. According to strict safety protocols, whenever a keeper entered, a heavy vertical slide and 2 separate gates had to be securely closed to ensure the tiger remained isolated from the area being cleaned. But on that tragic morning, all 3 barriers were accidentally left open. Without realizing the danger, Rosa stepped into the paddock, completely unaware that Sissup had full access to the space. Moments later, the unthinkable happened. The tiger lunged at her with incredible strength, clamping its powerful jaws around her neck. The force of the bite was so severe it fractured her spine and severed her spinal cord, leaving her instantly paralyzed and unable to fight back. Sissup continued his attack, biting and clawing with devastating precision. Rosa's arms were shredded, her right leg torn apart, and deep gashes covered her body, evidence of repeated mauling. The injuries caused massive blood loss within seconds. A visitor, arriving early and looking through the viewing glass, was the first to spot Rosa lying motionless on the ground. They immediately sounded the alarm and emergency staff rushed to the scene. But it was already too late. Investigators later confirmed there had been no mechanical malfunction with the gates or slides. The tragedy occurred because the safety barriers had not been closed as required. The zoo's security system depended entirely on the proper human procedure being followed every single time. Rosa's death deeply shook her colleagues and the zoo community. Known for her dedication and love for the animals she cared for, her passing became a heartbreaking reminder of how one small oversight in a high-risk environment can turn fatal in seconds. Alexis Martinez. On December 24, 2009, Alexis Martinez, an experienced marine trainer at Loro Parque in Tenerife, Spain, was working with Quito, a massive male orca weighing over 6,600 pounds. Alexis had spent years training and performing with marine mammals, but that morning something went terribly wrong. The training session started out as routine. Alexis entered the water with Quito, practicing signals and interactions the whale had been taught through repetition and reward. But staff nearby noticed that Quito wasn't responding as smoothly as usual. His movements seemed off, slower, less predictable. As Alexis swam toward the shallow platform to wrap up the session, Quito suddenly turned aggressive. Without warning, the orca lunged forward, ramming Alexis hard in the chest with his rostrum, the rounded front of his head, and forcing him underwater. Other trainers on the poolside immediately tried to intervene. They clapped, shouted commands and even shook food buckets to distract Quito. But the orca ignored every signal. It surfaced briefly for air, then dove again straight toward Alexis. Witnesses said Quito lifted Alexis out of the water on his rostrum before clamping down and dragging him below. When Quito finally released him, Alexis's body floated motionless beneath the surface. Rescue teams tried desperately to move the whale into another tank to reach him, but Quito resisted, blocking the gates and playing with the barriers, delaying every attempt. Only after staff used a large net to redirect the whale were they able to pull Alexis from the pool. Medical personnel tried to revive him, but it was far too late. The autopsy revealed the horrific impact of the attack. Alexis had suffered massive internal bleeding caused by blunt force trauma. His chest had been crushed, with multiple compression fractures, and several internal organs were torn apart. The tragedy shocked marine parks across the world. It revealed how unpredictable orcas could be, even with their most trusted trainers, and underscored the immense danger of working so closely with such powerful animals, especially when something triggers their natural instincts. Nordine Montong. On May 29, 2009, at the Singapore Zoo, Nordine Montong, a 32-year-old Malaysian animal handler, was going about his usual routine caring for the elephants. He'd been with the zoo for years and was known by his co-workers as calm, patient, and deeply affectionate toward the animals he worked with. That day, Nordine was assigned to oversee the elephants' evening bathing session, a daily ritual where keepers guided the massive animals into the enclosure's pool to wash and cool off. But as the session progressed, something strange happened. Witnesses said Nordine suddenly began acting out of character. He climbed over the safety rail and entered the elephant enclosure, something no handler was ever allowed to do during open hours. Colleagues nearby shouted for him to stop, but he ignored them. In a moment that shocked everyone, he walked directly toward one of the elephants, Chawang, a massive 29-year-old male known for his strength and unpredictability. As soon as Nordine got close, Chawang became agitated. The elephant raised his trunk, trumpeted loudly and charged forward, slamming into Nordine with brutal force. The impact threw him to the ground, and before anyone could react, Chawang wrapped his trunk around Nordine, lifted him into the air, and hurled him against the enclosure wall. The crowd of visitors screamed as keepers desperately tried to intervene, shouting commands and throwing food to distract the elephant. But the chaos only escalated. Chawang stomped toward Nordine again, striking him multiple times with his trunk. By the time emergency responders arrived, Nordine was unconscious. He was rushed to the hospital but was pronounced dead shortly after. The autopsy later confirmed the severity of his injuries: multiple broken ribs, crushed internal organs, and fatal head trauma. Investigations that followed couldn't explain why Nordine had entered the enclosure in the first place. Some witnesses believed he might have been suffering from emotional distress or exhaustion. Zoo officials described the event as deeply tragic, calling Nordine a valued member of the team who had devoted his life to animal care. The incident left both visitors and staff in disbelief. It was a stark and heartbreaking reminder of how even experienced handlers, those who love and care for these creatures daily, can be at risk in a split second of unpredictability. These stories remind us that no matter how much we train or trust a wild animal, nature will always have the final say. Each tragedy is a powerful lesson in respect for life, for instinct, and for the untamed world we can never truly control. If this video moved you, don't forget to subscribe and share it with others who should hear these stories. And as always, thank you for watching.